pleasure to meet y'all at last. Now here I am with a compilation of Why Is That questions. These were random Why Is That questions that I've hardly ever gotten to answering, but here we are today. It is November 30 of 2018, and I'm here to tell you that I've got Why Is That questions that have still been unanswered by many. So thank you for sending me your questions, and let's get started. Why is that you create a lot of content that would be suitable for television? Well, the thing is, even though I do not have the money or even the equipment to make myself available on actual networks in television, YouTube has become a much easier place for me to use my creativity and forethought as to how television would work and how I would intend to bring television to life. And with my creativity and everything else that I put into play, there's a really good chance for me that I'll just keep on going, making all of my content, and there's a really good chance otherwise that anything can go very well. But there's also other times that anything could go wrong. There's always the case, though, that I would just delve right into the problem and just fix it. If it's just a glitch on my videos, if it's just blurriness on my videos, if it's anything in general, then I know how to fix it. So with that being said, it's really just a step forward towards what television would have actually looked like for me. Why is that you always tend to make more commitments than you would do with promises, especially when it comes to YouTube? Now, there's plenty of explanation based on this, and there's absolutely a lot of stuff that I have to do with commitments. So it's not just YouTube that I tend to make commitments out of. It happens to be a lot more things in life, because here we go based on this. So the first thing as to how I tend to make more commitments than I would do with promises is, one, according to some signs that I found out during my school time especially, it says that winners make commitments while losers will only make promises. And that is what happened to inspire me to take on more commitments than promises. And as such, that is actually one of the primary guidelines. And as such, that is one of the primary bullet points that I got based on my evidence as to how I tend to make more commitments than I would with promises. Reason 2 as to how I make more commitments than promises. They ensure that I tend to get my tasks done the right way rather than the wrong way, which back then I have tended to do. Which back then I have actually done things the wrong way, and this is just not very efficient, and it's not very practical in one's terms. And reason number 3 happens to be just how sometimes there always comes a point in time in which that we got ourselves something that we have to get done, and so when we make a commitment to do it, this would motivate us into actually doing it, whereas with a promise, this would only give a slim chance as to how one can actually get the task done right. Why is that you're so warm-blooded that you are very resilient to cold? And of course they have actually seen some of my vlogs sometime within the last month, especially during colder weather, because I've done lots of vlogs during colder weather and I've hardly worn anything that's warmer than just a sweater. Other than that, I've just worn t-shirts and shorts. That's about all it. With colder climates though, it's really not as much of a big deal for me, because being in Wisconsin in the Midwest, where it's much colder than the equator or even down south from here, it would be my job to actually keep myself as warm as I can, but get this, being much more warm-blooded than others, I've got a very resilient system that can very much protect itself from the cold. And how I can actually do that is actually really darn simple, because how active I am, with how much energy I have, with much adrenaline that flows through my bloodstream. It's very much simple that I can definitely keep myself as protected against the cold as I can. The cold itself, though, can be actually pretty brittle in terms of the different seasons that range off from summer to fall to winter to spring. Any of the 4 seasons that we've got here, as well as the 2 equinoxes and 2 solstices that take place every year, even on leap years, we still got ourselves some type of cold around here. But of course, no matter what kind it is, what kind of year it is, what kind of season it is, if it gets cold, then well, my body's always prepared to do the inevitable. But there's another big factor as to why I don't have just adrenaline, and I don't have just a lot of energy that flows through my bloodstream to keep myself as warm as possible during colder situations. And there's also a much bigger factor that plays into my bloodstream becoming warmer, to the fact of which that I do not necessarily have to wear that warmer clothing just to keep myself warmer than usual. There's also the fact that with the kind of food I eat, which is usually actually colder during colder times, because as it turns out, warmer stuff can actually make your body want to cool itself down, because hot chocolate wouldn't necessarily work, because otherwise, when you consume hot chocolate or anything hot in general in colder climates, and then you go outside, you'll realize that you'll get much colder than usual, because what happens is that your body wants to cool down because of a hot substance found within your tissue, your epidermal tissue. There's a hot substance found within the subcutaneous tissue of your own body. If it's your bloodstream, if it's your stomach even, because that's especially where a lot of hot substances tend to go, unless we're having some other kind of hot on our hands. Hot that we consume goes down here. Your body would want to cool itself down rather than warm itself up. Although you would feel only a little bit of warmth for at least a few minutes. However, though, that just won't really help you, because if you compare that when you eat something cold, then you'll really have yourself more luck on your hands. You'll feel more lucky than you even realized, because what happens is that you'll actually become more warmer, because unlike what happened with the other properties of temperature in your system, consuming something cold would actually make your body want to warm itself up, because with the cold substance that is found within your system, messages to your brain shout out that your body needs to warm itself up. Otherwise, the cold substance would risk making your body temperature drop to the point at which you would suffer from hypothermia, which is a condition that ranges to some pretty low temperatures in your system. And that, of course, is not a pleasant experience for many. Not even myself, even though I've never had that. The worst I have suffered by far in terms of cold would be frostbites to the wrist. And of course, there actually is still kind of a mark right there. It's almost pinkish, and it's not as big of a scar as I thought it would be, because the frostbite covered almost my entire wrist when my wrist was exposed, and it didn't turn black to the point at which it needed to be amputated, but it's a good thing that my body is once again very resilient against the cold. Frostbite wouldn't even work on my skin. Why is that? You tend to make longer videos, ones that are 2 hours or more. It's a pretty technical option for me to make much longer videos that are especially longer than 1 hour, because this way, let's say that someone is having a road trip and they're trying not to focus more on their phone than they are when driving a car. With my videos being at least 2 hours in length, or some of them at least, this would give them the opportunity to not focus on their phone as much as they would with driving a car. Why is that? You do your best to engage with the community. I engage with the community because it would help me grow my channel. Why is that? You have an attitude. The thing is, I don't. Sorry. Why is that? You sometimes tend to slack down on vlogs or videos altogether. There's much more reasons to it than just me telling you that I tend to slack down on vlogs or videos altogether because of life. And of course, life tends to matter much more than just YouTube. Why is that? You sometimes tend to use the same shirts. Well, I don't have enough money to buy more than 70 shirts, thank you very much. I've got other clothes to buy. Why is that? You sometimes tend to live in the past. And of course, why is that? You sometimes tend to live in the past. Now I'm going to be completely honest about this, like I always do. There's just some point in time at which I tend to think back. There's just some point in time at which I tend to think back on all of the memories that I've had throughout my lifetime, and I just tend to really live around that time at which as if it happened to me a second time. Why is Choo Choo so cute? And that's actually pretty easy to answer because, well, Choo Choo's a Yorkie for one. The reason being why Choo Choo is so cute is because as a Yorkie, he has a lot of purebred parts of him that are just... Why is that? You look to the future, whereas you look to the past a lot. Well, some people are like this, really. I've just got a really big nostalgia filter in my head, as well as a filter in my head that allows me to plan for the future, really. Why is that? You use YouTube as a way to make extra money. Now, there are plenty of ways for me to make a living, including mowing lawns, shoveling snow, and even flipping houses, but get this, YouTube happens to be a very easy way for me to get started in the workforce. Why is that? You have too much hair on your body. And of course they're referring to me about how much body hair I have on me. They've probably seen a lot of my vlog videos of which I do show some of my body in the process, and especially the legs and arms, both of which have tons of hair on them. But here's my answer to that. I just have body hair, alright? A lot of us do. And the ones that don't, well, they're pretty much just big Olympic swimmers, or they just want to shave their arms and legs for fun. I, of which, probably have no plans to do it at the moment because body hair represents manliness, and it also guarantees attraction for others. Why is that? You're doing interviews now. Well, there's always some point in time in which I do intend to apply for a job, and this in turn I'd have to have applications, a resume, and an interview all set up for me to get ready for the workforce once again. Why is that? You have no desire to travel around the world. And here is actually the big scoop to it, because I actually do have a desire to travel around the world one day. The big factor though is that, as I've said in another Why's That episode, I've only gone to Hawaii. That was the only location in the entire world that I've been to. Other than that, I've never left the United States. Hawaii, though, is actually part of the United States, but it's the only land that I have been to that is not American land. From Maine to California to Washington to Florida, that is what America is generally. Alaska and Hawaii are part of America as well, but they're just not attached to the mainland here. And, well, I can't necessarily blame geography for doing this whole thing. Neither can I blame erosion or millions of years of continental drifts or anything else like that. I can't necessarily blame any of that for that matter. But anyhow, though, I do have myself a pretty big desire to travel around the world. And how I would want to do that is, well, first of which I would have to wait a little while longer because I may not have enough money to even get out of the country and to head on over to another country. Well, although plane tickets are not as expensive as I thought, because last time I looked into them, they weren't even as expensive as I thought they would be. For just one person of a plane ticket towards Southwest Airlines, I can't necessarily estimate the price though, because it actually just depends on whatever kind of class you buy. And I have actually gone into a lot of different classes and the coach even on Southwest Airlines. The only other airline I've been on was United Airlines. Nothing else really. Southwest Airlines has been the cheapest use of air travel for me, and I don't really see any other point in which I can change. But here's the big picture as to me traveling around the world. I plan to do it in 6 months during 2022. 6 months throughout the year 2022 is where I plan and when I plan to start this endeavor of mine. Traveling around the world in 6 months is what I call this project. Project around the world in 6 months. And I didn't just rip that off from Around the World in 80 Days. That kind of film is a much different story than Around the World in 6 months. 80 Days is nearly not 3 months. Whereas with 6 months, it's just different. It actually is at least 180 days, depending on what kind of months it is that I'm traveling with. And speaking of which, I actually do intend on doing through the months of June through December. June through December. And how I plan on doing that as well, I probably won't go into detail about it that much, but well, first I'd want to consider going on over to Europe. And then I would want to head on back after a few more weeks of continuous planning. I'll probably end up going over to Russia, and then probably to Japan, then down south towards Oceania, where Australia and New Zealand are, and Indonesia. Then I'll probably just head on west over towards India and Africa. I don't know about the Middle East though. I'm sure that the Middle East is not peaceful enough to let an American tourist like myself enter. That's probably something I can't ultimately predict, but here in 2018, whereas 4 years from now in 2022, I'm just more than a considerate feller out there that just really wants to have himself a goal in mind. But here's another pretty big story as to why traveling around the world would mean a lot to me. It would allow me to gear myself sight of what cultures would await for me to research. It would also gear for me whatever kind of worldwide traditions would take place, and whatever kind of other bits of culture out there would be waiting for me. And of course, I actually did take a cultural class last year. Last year I was in high school, and for the first semester I took a cultural class. And I did actually pretty well on it. I mean, I really loved that. There was a lot of projects on there, but I still did pretty darn well. And that was also where I got to know about certain other languages. And that was also the fact in which I got to learn about Italian. That was actually the time for me when I first learned Italian. And to this day, I still continue to learn Italian up until the point at which that it would be time for me to start finding a new language. Because, as I've said before in some other episodes of mine here on Why Is That, I tend to learn very quickly, and in turn, there would be a lot other stuff that I would have to learn other than just the one thing that I've learned for a considerable amount of time. Because that is just usually how my mind is processing right now. It's a fast processor, just like a SanDisk USB flash drive. And, I mean, that's such a good comparison right there that I just made. But anyway, anyways though, I mean, wait. Oh gosh. However though, on site back to 2022, of which I plan to start and end my little worldwide travel of 2022, around the world in 6 months is what I call it. I would actually plan on starting in America and ending in America, because at the same time I'm planning to travel around the world in 2022, I've also scheduled my next trip to Florida in 2022. In December of 2022 is where I plan to go to Florida again. Last time I went to Florida was in May of 2017. The next time I plan to have in December of 2022. And nothing before that or even after. I wouldn't want to wait too late for that. None of that even. So for right now, it all just comes down to the point at which that I have myself quite an inevitable load of excitement waiting for me, and I tend to get a little bit nervous because at the same time that I'm excited to just go on such a huge trip like that, I'm also very concerned about my financing, because there's a good chance that I might only be able to afford at least 3 plane tickets, while at the same time having enough money for, I don't know, at least a couple of nights in certain hotels and wherever I'm going to be going to. There's also food and souvenirs that I've also got to pay for with the money I have. And there's a good chance that I might not even make it. So that's why I decided to just wait for a little while longer, wait at least 3.5 years to find out if I have enough money. But then again, considering the fact that how well I'm doing with the Skills to Pay the Bills course that I've got going right now, I feel that there's actually going to be a good chance for me to, well, get my finances checked out sooner rather than later, because Skills to Pay the Bills course completion would guarantee me interviews towards full-time job opportunities out there with at least 40 hours a week and probably some really good pay out there. And I'm not just saying that full-time job would be something I will need for at least 3 years just to keep my finances in check, so this way I can get this around the world in 80 days plan checked out in 2022. I would also want to consider trying to pre-plan what else I can try during 2022. At the same time that I'm going to be in Europe and Japan, Russia, anywhere else around the world that I'm going to be going to. There's also going to be the time of which that I've got myself a little problem around here, because at the same time though, I mean, there's just not much else of which that I can hope for other than my finances to go up as high as possible for me to almost waste it on everything around the world. I mean, that just wouldn't necessarily be such a exciting thing. Once again though, it won't be for at least a few years though. I won't plan to travel around the world any more than 3 years, 4 years, but I won't have any plans to travel around the world in 4 years really. Well, it's almost 4 years considering how I want to do it in a 6-month time span. But there's also the chance that, well, I can end up getting stuck somewhere or even lose all of my money. And I don't know, it could be right back to where I started. It would be a fun time for me to just do something like this, but once again, 2018, right now, here in October of 2018, is not the time at which I plan to do my 6-month worldwide trip. So there you have it, really. There's just not much else that I can really explain about this, and there's also lots more that I have left to really answer. But here is the answer to the why is that question I've got right now as to why is that I have no intention on traveling around the world. My answer to that would be because I don't plan on doing it right now. I plan on doing it later. I call this around the world in 6 months, and I plan on doing it throughout the year 2022. And that's the bottom line to the question, and that's just the full answer to the question, really. But if you guys want to see more, go down to my channel. Make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side. And let's also not forget about the times in which that I keep on giving shout-outs to every one of these YouTubers and Twitter users out there who have sent me their questions over the last month and a half. I would thank everybody for sending me their questions. So here you got yourselves shout-outs to all of these people who have given me their questions. And there's also these people out there that have also spent some of their time supporting my Twitter and YouTube by giving them shout-outs. So I give them a shout-out back, really. I don't know if shout out back is a thing, but I hope to find out one day that something like that is a thing. Why is that you make sure that you have plans arranged? And of course, you probably could be referring to any plans I might have in the future, or any plans that I have had from today. I do make sure to have plans arranged at any given time, because if there isn't any plans that I can set forward, then well, there would probably be nothing that I could do. There would be a good chance that I could forget about something, and there would definitely be something else that could go wrong, and there's also opportunities of which that I would want to have at some point later on, and I do want to have to plan ahead, especially plan ahead, so this way it would be a great time for me to figure out exactly when I could get these opportunities figured out. And for now though, I'm more than certain that there's going to be a lot bigger opportunities out there today, of which I might not have even discovered yet, but nonetheless there's also going to be some other big opportunities out there that I could try to fetch and really try to get forward. And if I do end up getting these opportunities, of which I have had the plans to be successful, then I'm more than certain that there's going to be a lot of benefits to come by later on from today. And so, here you have it. You got yourself the remainder of all the Why Is That questions answered all in one single video. And so, I hope you enjoyed this whole segment of Why Is That. And believe it or not, I'm actually going to stop for a while, because I feel like answering a lot of questions while out here in a cold room might not be very exciting. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to move along and continue on with my other content that I work on probably a lot more often than I do with Why Is That. So, if you want to see more, make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.